Welcome to the session, The Dynamics of Karachi. Today we have Laurent, Steve Inskeep, Aquila Ismail, Bina, Shah, and Arif, Hasan. And the session will be moderated by Kamran Astar Ali. The session will last for an hour, at the end of which there will be a question and answer session. And I welcome the speakers. Thank you.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Kamran Astar Ali, and this session is The Dynamics of Karachi. We are very fortunate to have five very distinguished speakers with us today, and I'll give very brief introductions of each one of them. After which I'll try to be very, very brief in my comments. We will give about 5 to 6 minutes, which can stretch to 7, to each of the speakers. We just have an hour, and we would really like to open it up to all of you so that we can have some kind of an interaction. I think the hour is not enough for us to really benefit from the exchange, but we'll try. And then things can spill over into the coffee and the lunch time and things like that. So to my right, of course, is Mr. Arif Hasan. For Karachiites, he needs no introduction, but I'll try a little bit. Arif Hasan Saab is an architect, urban planner, public intellectual, activist, teacher for many of us, mentor, and is author of many books, articles, writes regularly for the press. Some of the recent books that have come out is from microfinance to the building of local institutions, participatory development, unplanned revolution, and there are several. Next to him is Bina Shah. She's an author and also writes for newspapers in all over the world, columns. She's a fiction writer, has 4 novels and also books of short stories. To her credit, her books include Slum Child, The 786, Cyberspace, Where They Dream in Blue, and I'm sure we'll see much more coming out from her pen soon enough. Next to Bina Shah is Laurent, who's a research fellow at CNRS in France, and right now you're at the Center for Human Sciences in Delhi, and he's also research associate at Center for the Study of India and South Asia in Paris, and he's done extensive research on Karachi, especially in the Liari area, and has recently co-edited a book with Chris Jaffrello, Muslims in Indian Cities. Next to him is Aquila Ismail, was taught for many years at NED. A lot of you who are here do know her because of maybe have been taught by her. She's an electrical engineer, was associate professor of electrical engineering at NED. But she had another side, has always had another side, her love and passion for literature. She's translated many books and recently also published a novel of her own, Martyrs and Marigold. Last but not the least, our guest from Washington, D.C., Steve Inskeep, who's the co-anchor of the most listened to and I think the most prestigious and important news program on US media, Morning Edition. And my family and myself, my children, wake up to his voice every morning, which is very soothing. And apart from his many talents, Steve came to Pakistan a few years ago, came to Karachi, and has written what I think is one of the most important books on Karachi in the last 10 years, Instant City, and he kindly sort of took time off from his very busy schedule to be here, so we're very thankful. But thank you all for coming. And I just have a few questions, and then hopefully our guests will respond to these questions, or if they have other ideas and they want to talk about the way they think about Karachi, the way they think about its future, its past, its present, and that would be up to them. Some of the questions, and this was some of the things that I spoke to Steve, I spoke to Arif Saab. So one of the questions, of course, comes with the issue of how we perceive Karachi in present day, and is the city ungovernable? And the other question is, unplanned growth is it actually good for the city? And then the third question is what is the relationship between our city of Karachi and with its own hinterland? Now these questions come out from a series of ways in which a lot of us, and I'm sure all of us who are sitting here and who live and have grown up in the city or have a special relationship with Karachi, have thought about these questions and other questions in many ways. But one of the things that I've also thought about is that how, despite our differences, because it is a city with multiple languages, multiple people of multiple classes, backgrounds, and associations, but despite our differences, are there ways to live with these differences together? Can we live with tacit agreements, and can we create a future politics which, despite our differences, can go beyond the politics of conflict to something that is based on kindness and empathy? This may sound utopian, but I'm just throwing it out as ideas. Is there a possibility that despite our differences, there can be tacit agreements to get along? Now, the other issue, of course, is also that the issue of public spaces, where, I mean, our city, does it have the kind of public spaces which would bring all of us together, again, with all the diversity of class, of gender, of nationalities, of ethnicities, of professions? Are there public spaces, I mean, that can bring women, the disenfranchised, the marginal? And would these kinds of public spaces help us in bringing us together, despite that we do not have to become one in this process? The third thing is that what are the processes, and we have seen it continuously in the histories of violence that the city goes through periodically. What are the histories, or what are the mechanisms of repair and maintenance that that the city has? This is kind of an organic or a biological metaphor. You know how certain pathologies in our bodies are then repaired and then they function again, right? So if you take that kind of a metaphor for the city, that even despite the kinds of infections, again, sort of biological metaphor, infections and certain kinds, there are ways in which that the city comes back together. And what are those mechanisms? Can we build on them to, again, live in spaces that we all can coexist? So can we learn from people's own lives and imagine a future politics where the analysis is not always about conflict and fear and friction, but we could think about living with disagreements and perhaps also creating consensus? Perhaps right now, we always have this seduction of the immediate, of the present, that we have to say something, we have to really solve it, because there's a certain kind of a seduction to that. But perhaps we need to really take a back seat, and think about new ways or new questions for the future, and which is sort of, I'm thinking about a politics which is emergent, perhaps also a politic of emergency, but we can go into that. I'll be too theoretical. But anyway, these are my few words. Maybe I've taken more than I should. And I'll hand over to Steve. Perhaps we'll start with you. You're our guest from abroad.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction, Kamran. And thank you all for coming to this session. I'm honored to be here. The microphone is allegedly on. I get a little posters and things. Wow. You'd think after all these years of broadcasting that I would know how to use a microphone. I'll do my best. Thank you for letting me go first, because that will allow people wiser than I to add on or correct what I say. It's a great honor to be on this stage. It's a great honor to be on this stage with the people who are here with me. There are at least 3 people on this stage who assisted me in some way with the book. I read their writings, I listened to their talk, and Laurent, Arif, and Kamran all in their own ways, and I bet there are more people in the audience today who've been helpful in some way. It was a great experience to come to this city and to listen to people and to learn the stories of people in this city. You hit very wisely on a number of really key themes. You talked about the diversity of this city and asking how we can deal with those differences. This is something that many people in this room will be intimately familiar with, and that I came as an outsider and came to learn. And it was a very interesting experience for me, because I've been coming to Karachi every now and again since 2002, but when I began investigating the city seriously as a city, it was around 2008. And I met some MQM officials in the city government. And someone in that group spoke of the city as, it's our city, this is our city, by which they mean Muhajirs, who came here after 1947, or beginning in 1947. And then later, as an outsider, you come to sit with someone who is Sindhi, who will say, of course you realize this is our city, right? And then I sat at some point with a journalist who was of Baloch extraction, who says, you realize this is a Baloch city, right? And it should really, by all rights, he said, be part of Balochistan. And then you go and meet with some Pashtuns who are becoming more and more numerous and do not necessarily claim the city as their own, but are claiming a part or a place in this city. And what I've just described is a dynamic that underlies a lot of the political tension in this city, that underlies a lot of the violence in this city, a lot of the difficulty in this city. But I would like to suggest that that diversity, which appears to be a weakness and a problem, is in fact the great strength of this city. And the language groups that I mentioned, as many of you know, is only the surface of the incredible diversity of this city. There are so many different religious groups. There are nationalities beyond the ones that I mentioned, language groups beyond the ones that I mentioned, and that's the way that a great city should be. When I studied the history of Karachi and its tremendous growth from 1947 onward, one of the things that I learned was that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, when making Karachi the capital of Pakistan at the beginning, when thinking about how, in a very short time frame, to create a state, recognized immediately and instinctively, given the life that he had led, that he needed the support and the wisdom, the financial capital, and the brain power of every kind of person who was here. The late Ardeshir Kawasji, who I admired very much, and who many of you, I'm sure, felt the same way, if not more so, told me a story of his father and Jinnah. And Kawasji, of course, the family was in the shipping business, and Jinnah comes to this man who is not a Muslim and said, I need you to help me found a national shipping firm. This is a story that Kawasji told. Kawasji reached out to Hindus who were a majority of Karachi at that time, as everyone in this room will know. And Jinnah reached out to Hindus, is what I mean to say, of course. And you have a sense at the very beginning of the city of an understanding of the importance of diversity, of the understanding that you can draw on the resources of so many different kinds of people, and at the same time that diversity coming under attack. After a series of violent incidents and the story of partition that you all know so well, the vast majority of Hindus left. And the city, in my reading of it, in my understanding of it, and others will correct me if I'm wrong, became less stable as it became less diverse. Making the city less diverse did not make it a better place. And I think that lesson is extraordinarily valuable today. This is a city that continues to grow. It is interesting as an observer to note that there is to be a census in Pakistan every 10 years. And there was one in 1998, and I know the next one is coming up, right? 10 years? 15 years? In any case, we don't know precisely how many people are here, but we know that it's many, many, many millions. The United Nations estimates are over 13 million. The local estimates, I know, are considerably higher than that. It continues to grow. Different kinds of people continue to come here. That creates tremendous challenges, which we're going to discuss. It also creates tremendous energy and opportunities. And one of the reasons that this is a place that is such an absorbing city, such an exciting city to visit, and such an exciting city, I'm sure, for many of you to live in, is because of the energy of that migration. The power of millions of people, most of them poor, trying to make their lives just a little bit better. That's an incredible human force. It is extraordinarily difficult to control when it happens as rapidly as it has happened here, but it is an incredible force and it is the reason that this city in many ways felt to me like a world all its own. I've written about cities for many years, and as I began to explore this city, I felt this was a city that would allow me to explore and talk about most, if not all, the issues that interested me about a city.
Thank you, Kamran. Thank you all of you for coming. I came to Karachi as a young woman from Dhaka when I was thrown out of that part of Pakistan when it became Bangladesh. And ironically, I entered this city on the 20th of August, 1972, and my parents had entered East Pakistan on 21st of August, 1947. So my parents were dispossessed twice. I migrated here once. But this city embraced me. This city gave me a haven. This city immediately took me in. It gave me an instant identity as a Pakistani, which I had lost in Dhaka when it became Bangladesh. And my first encounter with the city was in Burns Road and Pakistan Chowk, because I began to study I immediately got admission in NED Engineering University as a second year student, and when it was located in the old part of the city. And Burns Road and Pakistan Chowk were so embracing. I mean, they did not, I did not feel a stranger, although I had come here after, I mean, I had never lived here, but I came here and I fit in immediately. And when I joined NED in 1972 as a second year student, I was the only girl with 300 boys. I mean, that brings its own privileges, but yes, you become the center of attention. But in many ways, I felt, I did not feel intimidated, which showed me that there was a liberal streak in the city which allowed women to flourish, which allowed women to take up non-traditional fields of study and to flourish in it. So I graduated from when NED was still in the old city. It later went to the newer part, which is next to Karachi University now. And I married, I had my children here, and I brought them up. And this city was always a calming influence, although there was always a streak of action, of violence, but it never touched my life, because we had already been touched by tremendous violence in Dhaka as Urdu-speaking Pakistanis, or the so-called Biharis. So whatever was happening here was so great, it was so tranquil. But all that changed when General Zia-ul-Haq came into power. He changed the city tremendously. I joined the NED Engineering University then as a faculty member, and the first arms that came into my campus was during that time, and it was during that time that the student unions were banned, and I think our identity, my identity also came as a member, as an active member of the students' union while in the university. Now that avenue was taken away from my students to express themselves. Unions were banned, there was no say of any elected member in the syndicate or in the running of the university. And of course, we fought against it, and we succeeded to some extent in bringing the old forms back. But the number of arms that came into the campus was, we changed completely our life. We did not know from day to day whether we are going to survive. There were shootouts in the university, and we have seen our own teachers being killed, our students being killed, and this violence was totally ununderstandable. A violence which took place in Dhaka or in East Pakistan was because there was a clash of two, there was a civil war as such, or there was a freedom struggle taking place. But here, what was it that led to so much violence? It was the entrance of the extremist forces which tried to make their space, and the first space they made was in the universities of all over Pakistan. And I'm a witness to Mr. Gulbuddin Hikmatyar's walking along the corridors of NED with Kalashnikovs, and it was a frightening time. But we survived as the city survives. The city has survived so many untoward incidences, and I don't want to use the word resilient. It's been used too much, but it is a city which because it provides a haven for everyone who comes here. It's like New York, which says, "Give me you're tired, you're weak." This place does that, and without announcing it. We can all come here. We can all find an identity. We can all find a space within the city, and we can choose to be anonymous or choose not to be anonymous. At least that's our choice. We can do that. So my city, this Karachi, is much beloved. I find that the people here are so so dynamic. I mean, to use a dynamic in the sense that they embrace everything that's new. Like they've embraced technology now. They embrace liberalism. They embrace secularism. They embrace pluralism. And that is what I wanted to say in the last session, was that instead of the word secularism, maybe we should use the word pluralism, where we embrace everyone, where we embrace the diversity of religion, of culture, and then go forward from that. That everyone has a right to their beliefs, everyone has a right to their culture, which is what Pakistan is about. And I also wanted to say that when we came here in 1972, all of us students who came here from Dhaka and from other parts of East Pakistan, we formed the East Pakistan Student Action Committee, which was IPSAC. And I think that was the precursor of the APMSO, because that is what led, because in East Pakistan we felt later on hindsight that maybe if there had been a political representation, we might have stayed on there. But we were thrown out because we did not have a voice. Pakistan did not give us a voice, and Bangladesh did not, for obvious reasons. So we were active in the IPSAC. IPSAC became, I think it developed into APMSO, which then gave us the Mahajir Qawmi movement, later the Muttahida Qawmi movement. And it is something that we must not decry, because this city is a city of immigrants. This city is built by immigrants, like New York or like any other big city. And this is a totally urban phenomenon, a totally urban city. And I might add that right now, as we are sitting here, 30,000 acres are being added to this city, which is not part of the master plan. I think, yes. And 30,000 cities means within 5 years, 9 million people will become urban in this city. So 15 plus 9, you can imagine what the dynamic is going to be. So it's my beloved city. I love it.
So, Aquila, we can have unintended consequences of IPSAC, which we are all sort of living with today. So I'm just go ahead. Please go on.
Thank you. Okay. So I'd also like to thank the organizer for giving me an opportunity to present some ideas, that I developed by coming and going. Is it okay?
Yes, we like to share.
Okay. Yes, I think this is working. Thank you. So I'd also like to thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to present some ideas that I've been developing along the years. I've been coming to Karachi, a bit like Skiv, since the early 2000s. I started coming at a time when violence was receding in Karachi. Things seem to be getting better. Shamefully, they actually deteriorated in the next few years. So although I absolutely converge with Kamran and another emerging body of anthropological work in particular that has been coming out on Karachi in recent years, emphasizing the resilience, the transcendence of ethnic cleavages, etc. Although I think, this is very important to address other issues than political violence, I have the impression that this enigma of an enduring political violence in Karachi has not been fully addressed yet, and that there remains an enigma to this enduring and almost all-encompassing violence in Karachi. Throughout the years since the mid-80s, violence has, retained a certain level. It has actually escalated since 2007, and very few social groups, including the barricaded city elites, or very few social sectors of activity, the economy, culture, the arts, poetry, have actually been spared this omnipresence of violence. So I think it's important to go back to this enigma of violence, and since other speakers will talk about other forms of social life than violent mobilizations, let me say a few words, if I can, on how I've been trying to address this enigma of political violence in Karachi. The way I've been trying to explore this issue is through the idea that there is actually an ordered disorder in Karachi. Unlike some accounts we've been seeing too many often, either in the Pakistani or in the Western media, that Karachi would be drifting towards chaos, towards anarchy. I think there retains a certain form of order in Karachi, but unlike the traditional ways we've been taught to think about order, as if social order was necessarily working through the control and eviction of violence, I think the singularity, the peculiarity of Karachi is precisely that violence has become embedded in the social and political fabric of the city, which is what makes it so strange, so exciting, and so fearful at the same time. So what do I mean exactly by this idea of an ordered disorder? First of all, what is really striking in Karachi, unlike maybe in other more chaotic cities, is how there's been a certain relative stability, continuity of modes and patterns of domination in the city. Here, I mean, interesting parallels can be made with Bombay, a city which, in so many regards, has shown a similar trajectory to Karachi. Recent, cosmopolitan, port cities, which have faced, both of them since the 80s, a crisis of their cosmopolitan model, and a rise of ethnic politics, violence, which make the two cities so comparable to a large extent. However, the specificity of Karachi is we've seen the dominance of one political party, the MQM, which has proved to be more resistant to incumbency than the Shiv Sena in Bombay, which is also what makes the city so particular, with obviously, I mean, patterns of ownership that distinguish it from other cities of the region. What we've been seeing also, and that's something that has always struck me and for which I don't really have an answer, the violence we've been seeing in Karachi is not between enemies. It is actually a violence between intimate friends, between coalition partners. And here there's an enigma for which I don't have an answer. How can we explain that there is such cruelty, such creativity in macabre designs of violence between coalition partners who attack each other, maim and kill each other, and yet later on, after a few days, resume politics as usual. I mean, here there's something absolutely fascinating. What we've been seeing and what makes also this idea of an ordered disorder is that this violence is not entirely random. What is striking is since the mid-80s, most of the locales and timings and patterns of violence are actually the same. I mean, it's semi-peripheral violence. The place that Kasbah colony has, you know, in the violent politics of this city since the mid-80s, despite tremendous socio-economic and demographic changes, is also quite puzzling. And just to finish on that, I mean, the fact that this disorder is to a large extent ordered makes it to some extent predictable and manageable by local populations, by you people of Karachi. This is a fearful city, but at the same time, I mean, more than resilient, the people have learned, I mean, a certain form of survival politics to some extent, because this violence is also changing. Obviously, I mean, the more things change, the more they remain the same, but also the more they remain the same, the more they change at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Kaise hain? Sab theek thaak hain? Shahal, khush aayo? Kem cho? This is why we can't choose one language in which to speak, because Karachi has multiple languages and multiple identities. Forgive me, I'll speak in English because not everybody here understands our regional languages or our national language. That's no aspersion on anybody who lives here, but on my own limited abilities to communicate. I'm talking to you today as a writer, as a novelist, as a writer of fiction, and somebody who writes about Karachi. Karachi is a really, really difficult city in which to live, but it makes it a very easy city to write about. And my colleagues and I have been utterly, utterly inspired by Karachi's beauty, diversity, strength, but also its cruelty, its ugliness, and its callousness. There are many metaphors with which we writers use to describe Karachi. Sometimes we think about this city as if we're living in a huge lunatic asylum. I've heard Karachi described as a sick patient with a disease. I've heard Karachi described as a whore, as a child, as a mother, as an angel, a savior, a heart with pulsing arteries, and a city of lights and a city of darkness. As Steve mentioned, one of the biggest questions for those of us who all live here is who really owns Karachi? Who belongs here? Is it Sindhis? Is it Muhajirs? Is it Pathans? Is it Parsis, Hindus, Punjabis? All of the above? None of the above? These are some of the questions we attempt to answer in our writing about Karachi. We attempt to make sense of the things that maybe don't make a lot of sense. We try to express the pain we feel about seeing our city fall apart around us. We try to express the joy that we feel at being in a place like the Karachi Literature Festival. We try to write about what it's like to live in the middle of a war zone, to live in a city that has a war going on around us, but it's undeclared. We try to write about what it's like to be witnessing a turf war, to live with guns on our doorstep, to live with the police everywhere we go, to live in the time of riots and of polio and of utter disregard for our personal safety. We've all braved, in fact, this morning to come here, difficult conditions in the city, so we all know what this is like. And yet we always search for the words to express this, and the words always seem to fall short, and yet we still try. My own journey in and out of the city has been nomadic. I was born in 1972 in this city, but I left almost immediately when I was 2 months old to go live in the United States. I returned in 1977 just as Zia had overthrown Bhutto. And I came back to the black days, and I grew up seeing women beaten by policemen, seeing people go to jail, seeing Bhutto hanged, and seeing nobody come out on the streets of Karachi to mourn him. I have seen Shahid Hamid's car riddled with bullets as I drove to work one morning. I've seen the city in flames when Benazir Bhutto was killed. But I've also seen everyday children carrying book bags, wearing uniforms, walking hand in hand to school. And I've seen the ubiquitous Hijra come dance at my car window and call me Guriya Rani, Guriya Rani. These are images that we distill into words on paper, and still we fall short. Karachi is unique in that it's the one city where I, as a woman, feel that I can operate with a measure of autonomy, of independence and self-respect. And yet I have to live every day with the indignity of the hudud ordinances, of the lack of passage of the domestic violence bill, of the utter assurity of people that my place is second class, and they have God on their side to prove it. All of us who are here today, whether we love or we hate this city, whether we're residents or visitors, whether we have a stake here or not, we're here today because we care about this city. We care in different ways and for different reasons. And I think that I can say with certainty, none of us are near ready to give up on it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having invited. Should I speak in Urdu? उर्दू में बोलें? जैसे आपकी मर्जी, जैसे आप कहेंगे. They'll understand. I don't think Steve needs to understand. चलिए, देखिए इसमें बहुत सारी बातें हैं. एक तो बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया फेस्टिवल का कि उन्होंने दावत दी मुझे यहाँ बात करने की. 5-7 मिनट में ये गुफ्तगू तो नहीं हो सकती, बहुत मुश्किल है, मगर चंद बातें मैं कहने की कोशिश करूँगा. पहली बात तो ये है कि कराची का गवर्नेंस स्ट्रक्चर जो है वो ख़त्म हो चुका है. पहली बात ये है, और ये कल जो एक सेशन हुआ था पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी पे, उसने, अगर आप लोग उनमें से कुछ लोग वहाँ गए थे, सो व्हाट अली चीमा सेड applies 100% to Karachi. So I think that is a very important issue. दूसरी बात ये दोनों मिला देता हूँ ज़बाने कि क्यों गवर्नेंस सिस्टम ख़त्म हुआ. Lot of nostalgia about Karachi, but that how peaceful it was and all the rest of it. That was the peace of the dead. एक colonial culture था, एक port city का, उसकी administration थी. It could never have survived. It lived on kinetic energy as long as it could. Populist politics के साथ साथ तब्दीली आनी थी, मगर जो इदारे थे गवर्नेंस के, उनमें किसी किस्म की तब्दीली नहीं आई. और जब तब्दीली आई तो बजाय उससे फ़ायदा होने के, उसके शहर के गवर्नेंस सिस्टम को बहुत बड़े नुकसानात पहुँचे. तो आई थिंक जब शिव सेना का और MQM का हम मुकाबला करते हैं तो इस बात को मद्देनज़र रखना चाहिए कि बम्बई में गवर्नेंस सिस्टम बरकरार रहा, कराची में गवर्नेंस सिस्टम टूट गया. पहली बात. इसके नतीजे में दो बहुत अहम चीज़ें सामने आई कराची में. एक पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ लैंड और दूसरा पॉलिटिक्स ऑफ भत्ता. ये गवर्नेंस सिस्टम के टूटने की वजह से हुई. और ये जो दो चीज़ें हैं, सारे शहरों में दुनिया के जहाँ ये गवर्नेंस सिस्टम्स टूटे हैं, और वो शहर बड़े शहर थे और उनमें एथनिक फ़र्क थे, मुख्तलिफ ग्रुपिंग्स थी, जहाँ ये टूटते हैं वहाँ टर्फ वॉर्स होते हैं. बहुत सारे ऐसे शहर हैं जिसका हम जिक्र कर सकते हैं. तो ये टर्फ वॉर्स होते हैं. अब आप ये देखिए कि अभी जिक्र किया अकीला ने कि 30,000 एकड़ जो हैं वो शामिल हो रहे हैं कराची में. बहुत ज़बरदस्त टर्फ वॉर्स हुए हैं इन 30,000 एकड़ के सिलसिले में, मगर और एथनिक पार्टीज़ ने इसमें हिस्सा लिया है, मगर जब उसकी डेवलपमेंट आती है तो पठान फाइनेंसर है, महाजिर दलाल है, सिंधी लैंड ओनर है, उनका कोई झगड़ा नहीं है. चंद आपको आदाद शुमार दूं. हर एक बस जो शहर से निकलती है, मंगोरा जाती है, वो 40,000 रुपये भत्ता देती है माहवार के, सिर्फ शहर में गैर कानूनी तौर पे दाखिल होके खड़े होने के लिए. सदर के जो हॉकर्स हैं वो तकरीबन 1.5 करोड़ रुपया माहवार देते हैं भत्ता. ये सारी चीज़ें डॉक्यूमेंटेड हैं, हमारी वेबसाइट्स पे जाइए, आपको सब मिल जाएगा. तो ये इतना बड़ा निज़ाम है ज़मीन के झगड़े का. आपके 2010 में 17 एस्टेट एजेंट्स मारे गए हैं. अब मैं अगर तफसील में जाऊं क्यों मारे गए हैं वो जा नहीं सकता, वक्त नहीं है मेरे पास, मगर वो सब इसी झगड़े में मारे गए हैं ज़मीन के. ये जो एक्सपेंशन हो रही है कराची की, कराची से बाहर पेरिफेरी में, वो कम नुकसानदेह है बनिस्बत उस एक्सपेंशन के जो कराची के अंदर हो रही है. आपकी जो पुरानी आबादियां हैं, रेगुलराइज, नॉन रेगुलराइज, वो सब फ्लैट्स में कन्वर्ट हो रही हैं. डेंसिटी से मुझे झगड़ा नहीं है कि अगर 600 पर्सन्स पर हेक्टर से डेंसिटी 4,000 हेक्टर हो जाए, दैट्स ऑल राइट, एक्सेप्टेबल. बट व्हेन द square meter of built space per person comes down to 2 meters, then I'm afraid you are going to have violence of some sort or the other, and it is going to be used, that violence. तो ये जो growth है, इसने पूरे पुराने शहर को और अब इन नई आबादियों को और पुरानी आबादियों को ये ट्रांसफॉर्म कर रही है. So I think these are very big issues, and these are all governance issues. Now, then I come, can I give you a few more minutes? मैं एक और चीज़ पे आता हूँ. शहर किसका है, क्या है? This whole problem of whose city and this conflict over the local bodies ordinance act, जो भी आप कहें, I think it has to be understood, and for this I brought some statistics. Karachi is no ordinary city with respect to being a part and capital of Sindh. It contains 62% of the urban population of Sindh, whereas Lahore contains only 22% of the urban population of Punjab. Sindh contains Karachi contains 30% of the total population of Sindh. Lahore contains 7%. Karachi contains 22% of the total urban population of Pakistan. Lahore contains 12%. 71% of the industrial labor force of Sindh is in Karachi. 74% of the total industrial output is in Karachi, and 78% of formal sector jobs are generated in Karachi. अब आप बताइए झगड़ा नहीं होगा तो क्या होगा? If you have complete decentralization, as is being proposed, Karachi will swallow up Sindh completely. It contains the most important educational institutions, the most important health facilities, and it generates 93% of the revenue. और ये जो local bodies का झगड़ा है, ये बुनियादी तौर पे ये जो वसाइल हैं, ये इनके कब्जे का झगड़ा है. For the representatives of the Urdu speakers, the more decentralized the system is, they can control some part of the province, because they are not in a majority anywhere, not even in the city. For the Sindhi-speaking population, they control the bureaucracy. They are the majority, 62 to 64%, if the census is correct, of the total population of Sindh. So they have that claim on the city. As long as you have the politics of constituencies and votes, this is not going to be resolved, and it will lead to violence increasingly over time. It reminds me of the conflict between the Muslim League and the Indian National Congress. M.J. Akbar said a very nice thing in an article. He said Pakistan was created because of the lack of generosity on the part of the Indian National Congress and a lack of trust on the part of the Muslim League. I think it was very well put. There were other factors also. I think there is a similar situation here. So you have to rise above the politics of ethnicity and look at the larger interests of the province and peace. There are other threats also perceived by various groups. If I look at statistics, मुझे बंद कर दीजिएगा, मना कर दीजिएगा, नहीं मैं रुक जाऊंगा. You know, मैं रुक जाता हूँ. Okay, चलिए. Okay. Let me just, I'll bypass the statistics, but let me come to something else. Public space. The entire planning and policy making in Karachi has a very strong anti-poor bias. This is deeply ingrained not only in the way planning is done and implemented, it is also ingrained in the places where planners are trained. It is ingrained in the places where bureaucrats are trained. They have nothing, they have only a superficial relationship with the city and its people. Consequently, you build flyovers, you don't care about the pedestrians. You change public space, I can give you many examples, in the way that the poor people can be pushed out of that place. It's a regular feature. No? You cannot rehabilitate people on state land within the city because you say ये कीमत बहुत ज़्यादा है, इसके पैसे नहीं दे सकते. जब आप कहेंगे हिसाब लगा के कि आप जो है 15 साल का कर्जा दीजिए, ये दे सकते हैं, तो वो कहेंगे but then the price of land all around this area will fall, बड़ा नुकसान होगा. So you are pushing the poor people either into these slums within the city, which are becoming slums, which are not slums before, or you are throwing them outside the city. And those who go outside the city become poorer. No jobs outside the city for the women, travel costs, many social problems because the father is never there. It's a whole list, I mean, it's all documented. So in my opinion, first and foremost, rising above the politics of constituency and votes so that you can work towards the reform system. Otherwise, you cannot work towards it. And secondly, which what Ali Chima argued yesterday, the need for a public sector reform, without which, I mean, there are many other things, but without this, you are not going to get this city right.
So, according to my watch, we have 7-8 minutes, but we started 5 minutes late. Ji, there's one there and then Meher Afshan here, and then Tasneem, of course. जी 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 आपके पीछे साहब and then Meher Afshan, yourself, फिर आप आ जाइएगा आप, then this will be 4 and then we'll take another round.
Minder Ahuja, human rights activist.
Just keep it short, sir. You don't have to.
Very short I would be. As far as I think about the Karachi's peace and this, that I think the basic solution is the how to bring Urdu speaking Sindhis and Sindhi speaking Sindhis to be a homogeneous, especially in Karachi. There we need Urdu speaking people to Sindhis to give a space to Sindhi speaking Sindhis in the education institutes in Karachi, which constitute a 60% population of Sindh. This is the basic problem. You see, this literally festivals, Sindhi speaking Sindhis, participation is 5%, not more than that. I ask question to Mr. Arif whether my analysis to this is right or wrong. Until unless we don't have, I think they're wrong.
Thank you. Excuse me, can I ask a question also? Maybe you could address it together. My question is very brief to Mr. Arif Hasan. Could you... I'm sorry.
Hello, is this working? My name is Meher Afshan Farooqi, and I'm here from the University of Virginia. My passport is Indian, and my nationality is Indian. So this is my first visit to Karachi, and I was very excited, and I just didn't know what to expect, because starting from the point when I received the invitation, I was getting all kinds of responses from my colleagues. Some people were telling me, don't go, it's a very unsettling place to go. And nevertheless, I just want to keep my question short. When I got to the airport, and then I came here to the hotel, I just noticed that the city seemed to me to be a place of great contrasts. There was the airport that seemed like run down. It didn't seem to be the kind of airport that would be servicing a city of this size. The people at the airport, the officials were very rude, but generally everyone else was very welcoming and warm. Then I looked at the homes, and they had these huge fortress-like gates, and there was always a guard with a rifle. But the people inside were very nice. So I was really puzzled, and then I heard all of you talk about it, particularly Bina was talking a lot about the contrast, the beauty and the cruelty and all of this, and then Arif Saab gave us a lot of statistics which made a lot of sense. I'm just getting to the point. Actually my question is, statistics don't have any face, and among all these contrasts, I'm sort of a little bit lost about who exactly is the average person of Karachi? Who are the Karachi people? Who is the middle class? Who is the common Karachi person? And I hope somebody will answer this question.
I have the mic now. Okay. My question is very brief. I would like Mr. Arif Hasan to shed some light on the potential of other urban centers of Sindh to absorb some of the migratory population, which Karachi is absorbing for such a long time.
Thank you very much. Great discussion. But I have a couple of comments and couple of questions as well. Sorry. Yes, I've noted them down on my notebook. Okay. We've talked about the ethnic divide of the city, but to my mind, the most scary development is the religious divide which is happening. And nobody has talked about that. So I would expect somebody to please comment on that, because I think that's the most important problem at hand. The other comments, but it's fine if we don't have time. I just want to make a few comments as well. Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, everyone. I'd just like to ask one quick question to Dr. Saab, Dr. Arif Hasan. Sorry, I don't know if you are a doctor. I assume you do. You certainly sound doctorial and professorial. Okay, my quick question, sir, is recently in the news, in the paper, we heard that there's going to be the mega investment in this city. Billions of dollars coming in from, I don't know, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, a huge building on Kutta Island, and mega investment for flats, commercial arcades, God knows what. And I'd just like to get Dr. Saab's, if you are a doctor, reaction on this. That's all, sir. And if you are not happy, why aren't you happy, sir? Are you cynical, sir? Are you trying to depress us? Are you trying to make us this great city of ours? Sorry. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Nazir Shazli and I'm teaching in a private university. I fully agree with my panel over here because, it is very easy to write about Karachi than to live in Karachi. Now, my question is that here we have a certain section of people who can understand what we are feeling. It is so true. People come here from diversity. Karachi welcomed the populace with open arms. Therefore, people feel so comfortable. How to address that audience who can't understand us, who are killing their throats for no reason? This is my question, please.
Excuse me. Excuse me, I want to raise a question here.
I wanted to address Arif Hasan Saab. The panel talked about Karachi and the various ethnicities and the phenomena of Karachi being urban. But is it really urban? I mean, if we look at the Sindhi and the Baloch population in particular, and what do we mean by urban? Because cultural forms and norms, which perhaps can get mixed up in trying to explain phenomena of either violence or sectarianism or religion. So is this city, just because it has maybe the framework of urban, is it really urban? I'm a little curious about that.
This reminds me of the old debate around culture of poverty and all those kinds of things, but I'm sorry, Oscar Lewis stuff. But anyway, there was one more up.
बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप सब ने बहुत दिल लगा के कराची के बारे में गुफ्तगू की मसला ये कि हमारे हुक्मरान हमें फेल कर गए वो कुछ नहीं कर रहे हमारी सियासी जमातें कुछ नहीं कर रही हमारे जो रिलीजियस लीडर्स हैं मजहबी लीडर वो कुछ नहीं कर रहे वो सब द पार्ट ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम कोई कराची में जो रोज़ाना 10, 15, 12 लोग कत्ल हो रहे हैं ये हम लोगों का मसला है जो कराची के शहरी हैं जिसके बारे में तमाम गुफ्तगू हो रही है तो क्या आप कराची के शहरी भी कुछ नहीं कर सकते या उन्हें कुछ करना चाहिए या किस तरह से करें क्या आपकी तरफ से ये सजेशन आ सकते हैं कि क्या किया जाए हमने तो ये कोशिश शुरू की है कि सिटीजन्स फॉर पीस के उन्वान से हम लोगों को जमा करें और अपना मुजाहरा करें और हम बताएं कि हमें ये मेहम नहीं चाहिए, हमें ये कत्लेआम नहीं चाहिए, हम इसके ख़िलाफ़ हैं और हम सब मिल के इसको रोकना चाहेंगे।
आप सबसे माजरत के साथ अगर मुझसे कोई कोताही हुई हो या किसी के साथ मैंने तंबी की हो, इसलिए मैं कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि वक्त कम है और मैं हमारे जो मेहमान यहाँ हैं इनको कुछ वक्त मिले ताकि वो फर्दन आपका जवाब दे सके। What I'll do is that I'll start with Steve again and we'll give each one of you a minute and a half and then you can address it. Yeah.
The other thing I'll say, a gentleman asked if we could address the religious divide. I want to note an item in Karachi's history that I discovered reading old newspapers in the Library of Congress. In 1950, a mob ransacked the KMC building, which then functioned as the city hall, as the center of city government. And the mob began with a dispute over the placement of a temporary place of worship, an improvised place of worship in a public park. I think that was revealing then, it's revealing now, because what you have is religion being used for political purposes to intensify a conflict that really at base is about the use of land, is about the true religion of a large city, which is the control of real estate. And yes, thank you, it's true. I would respectfully suggest that the majority of people who bring up religion in a political context are doing it to distract and divide you, and that is also true of a great many people who bring up other issues of identity politics, such as language politics. May I respectfully note that when I listen to Arif Hasan speak Urdu, he frequently breaks into English. May I mention that when I take a Punjabi-speaking person into an Urdu conversation, they can understand it. There are so many similarities between the languages of this country, so many words borrowed back and forth, and that is symbolically important. There is more that unites you than divides you.
Just 2 points. On the question of language, remember that we lost one part of Pakistan on the basis of language. It was the Bengali language movement that ultimately led to the breaking away, among other factors. The other thing is that when the young lady here talked about, is it urban? The 30,000 acres that I talked about all encompass more than 2,000 goats that existed outside the perimeter of Karachi, as is shown in the master plan. Now these goats, most of them consisted of Baloch residents and Sindhi residents, Sindhi speaking and Baloch residents. Now these have all been subsumed within the city. They have all been given tenure, which means according to the Goat Abad scheme. So by giving tenure, you have subsumed it within the city and you have added 9 million people to the population of this city. And remember that, but in spite of the goat residents being originally Baloch and Sindhis, now it is an ethnic mix, complete ethnic mix, where you have all shades of people, and it is no longer just a very poorest of the poor kind of a place. It is a lower middle class almost. Of that. So the dynamic of the city is going to change further in the next 5 years. I feel it is going to become 24 million or more. And just to put it in perspective, remember when Iraq was attacked by the US, it had 25 million. So, you know, you have 25, so, you know, it will become, it's like that. So, Iraq was 25 million people, and Karachi in 5 years is going to become 25 million people. And what will happen to their urban needs is what we have to talk about and listen to. Yes. Sorry.
Okay, I'll take the last question in Urdu, though I will spare you an answer in Urdu. There are too many distinguished literary minds here for me to hurt Urdu too bad. But just to answer the question that political parties would not do anything, you know, for the people, for the citizens of Karachi. I think this has to be nuanced. I mean, as you all know, the cadres of Karachi's political party eat the city voraciously. I mean, all these metaphors in Urdu, as in many African countries actually, of corruption often use alimentary metaphors. But I think political parties also feed the cities and citizens to some extent. Political parties, both as a collection of individuals and institutions, carry extensive activities of social work, while exploiting their economic rents, bata or other things, to distribute favors to their constituencies, such as jobs, housing, water, electricity connections. So in a city which is characterized by informality in all spheres of life, the intervention of politicians is indispensable to reduce uncertainty in everyday life. And thus, I'll end up on that. Once the fatalistic owner, the Patan owner of a restaurant in Hawke's Bay, which had closed down recently because of violence in the city, told me in December 2011, and I'll tell you that in Urdu, तो ये ही problem है MQM का, ये ही माँ है, ये ही बाप है, ये दूध पिलाएंगे फिर दूध मिलेगा, बाप अगर झूठा उताकर तुम्हारेगा, हम किधर जाएं?
We all are. I think the answer is that we defend each other. Drop the language of hate. If you hear somebody maligning a Sindhi, stick up for them. If you hear somebody maligning a Muhajir, stick up for them. A Shia, a Sunni, a Hazara, anybody. Stick up for each other. Show some courage in your words, if not your actions, and we'll get through this.
Very briefly, two things. First, the religious divide. The ethnic divide is perfectly understandable because it is linked to bhatta and land. It is understandable. The religious divide is not understandable. It is something that is being promoted and we do not know, we cannot put our finger on exactly what and why it is being done. The other is understandable. Secondly, about the Sindhi, Urdu-speaking Sindhi and Sindhi-speaking Sindhi, they have to come together. There is no doubt about it. For the long-term peace, it is essential. But I can tell you that today there is a major influx of Sindhi speakers into this city. And as the rural economy becomes more difficult for the landless, there is going to be a much larger influx. They don't have anywhere to go. They can't go to Peshawar. They have to come here. So you will be living with a very large Sindhi-speaking population, and if it's managed the way I said it should be, I think we will have a peaceful city.
So, apart from the structural and governance issues that have been addressed and that need to be addressed for the city to become a more functional city, more dynamic city, I think one of the things I would just say is that also think about a future politics in which empathy and kindness is also very much part of our vocabulary. Thank you very much, and a big hand to our people.